Thanks. It's a privilege to be here this afternoon speaking to all of you about some of Tacoma's surface water programs. I am an engineer, and my comments today will be from the perspective of a surface water manager of a Phase 1 jurisdiction. So, there we go. I wrote this slide very purposefully, and this statement about, I know it's kind of awkward here, but surface water programs can improve our environment, meaning natural systems, economy, and quality of life. And like I said, I was very deliberate about this statement, and I put can in there for a real purpose. That word can could be many words. It might be might, it could be probably, it could be do and does. And so I guess my point here is that surface water programs at their best will be science and data based. They will balance cost with benefit. They will constantly evolve as we learn new approaches, new science becomes available, and they're realized for application in the field. As a surface water manager, occasionally, I would like to more frequently, but just step back from the daily chaos of all the programs that are going on and just think about our program in Tacoma. And does it meet this kind of a standard? Is this the concept that we incorporate into our surface water programs? And sometimes, maybe you feel this way also, that it feels as if maybe we exist to satisfy permit requirements. I don't know, maybe you feel that way, maybe you don't. Some days go like that. But on the other hand, some days go really well, and we're able to move forward and keep the big picture in perspective and develop something really, really cool. And I think a lot of our programs in Tacoma go to the really cool point. So where are we headed in Tacoma? Gray infrastructure, which not many of us discussed today, but that's a huge part of Tacoma, of the surface water infrastructure, and perhaps several of you have seen Tacoma's infrastructure at work on Cairo, Como, and King within the last month. So, not so funny, but anyway. 1,500 miles of infrastructure, pipes, the pumps, are going straight into an asset management program, which is something I am incredibly proud of, but is a big topic and for another day. Topic today is, of course, the green infrastructure piece, the LID piece, the treatment piece. And where we're heading in those programs is to retrofits, but retrofits based on science and data. Regional facilities, so that, in fact, we can improve cost effectiveness. And we used to have a program in Tacoma, which was the In Lieu program. And my goal, it's not realized yet, but my goal is to resurrect the In Lieu programs, both for treatment and for flow control. And those are programs in which developers can pay into a fund, and then that capacity is provided in the system. So, the evolving practice of stormwater treatment in Tacoma, we've got the old system, the current system, which is development, redevelopment requirements. Those are from the manual, and they're imposed on development projects. That generates numerous on-site facilities, which we have to inspect during construction and maintenance and ongoing and making sure that they're still functioning. But where we want to go is a new focus on regional treatment. And we want to focus them upstream of Tacoma's most sensitive receiving waters, and I'm talking here about Commencement Bay and the Theophos Waterway. By 2015, and this is an amazing, amazing number, by 2015 in Tacoma, we will have constructed treatment for 850 acres, which are tributary to Commencement Bay and the Theophos Waterway. And so our goal in Tacoma with the surface water utility is to leverage that treatment capacity to support development, redevelopment. And so in this fashion, and for this topic, we, staff there in Tacoma, will be pursuing an in lieu of treatment program. And so we've built capacity for treatment, therefore the idea might be that we could accept funds from developers and thus build additional treatment capacity in additional areas of the city with other sensitive receiving waters downstream of areas that are of concern for the land use or whatever. So how about flow control? Flow reduction. Again, our classic program is the detention ponds, development, redevelopment requirements. But in Tacoma, we have a couple watersheds that are really capacity constricted. And they're the ones that discharge down to Fleck Creek and Leech Creek. And so we can expand the infrastructure for sure, dig out the holding basins and all, but we really also need to reduce the flow. And so we've initiated 2 pilot rain garden programs, which were in the TNT. You may have read about them. One is a residential rain garden program, and that, if you're in these 2 particular watersheds, we will assist you in putting rain gardens on your property and provide you a rebate up to $2,000 to do so. This was, well, I guess I would say that I think we have 4 actual participants at this point. And it was an offshoot of a pretty big initiative, the Healthy Homes, Healthy Neighborhoods, the Pierce Conservation District spearheaded. And we hope to expand that program in the other watersheds of Tacoma, which are not capacity constricted. We have certainly want to promote this program and intend to provide design assistance and soil testing and that kind of thing. But we're really focusing our efforts, not everywhere, but targeted, focused to what the challenge is and what we want to fix. So anyway, in keeping with the flow reduction, we've also really stepped out with the permeable surfaces. Cheney Stadium, also in the Tacoma News Tribune, an article, and that is quite a cornerstone project. It's 2 phases, and 10 acres of that site is now infiltrating, and that's quite a big deal. In addition, in that area, we have 23 additional acres which are infiltrated through permeable residential streets. So it took Tacoma a while to actually build some permeable asphalt surfaces that cars travel on. But now we've got a few, and we're going to see how it goes. So far, so good. But ultimately, we do have a plan to expand some of our holding basins and again relaunch the In Lieu of Detention program to assist development and redevelopment in Tacoma, and that would be focused again in the flood and leach watersheds which discharge to creeks. So we talked a little bit about Cheney Stadium, and here's a diagram of it. This is a project that is in its 2nd phase, its 2nd year of construction. The blue areas are the permeable surfaces. There's also a lot of trees that were planted, bioinfiltration at $2.8 million construction cost. That was for the full 2 phases of it. Project manager for this project is Jessica Knickerbocker, who is in the audience if you care to have more information on this particular project. Second one I'm just going to touch on here. This will be on the tour tomorrow morning. That's the Pacific Avenue streetscape. I will say that, just to back up here, Cheney Stadium project is an example of targeted flow control. Sure, there is treatment because the water's going into the ground, we never see it again. But the focus in Cheney, which discharges into the Fleck Creek system, is really flow reduction. It's at the top of the watershed, we want to get rid of it. We want to be smart about how we're attacking this stuff, and so this is really flow control based. But the next one, Pacific Avenue Streetscape, is upstream of the Foss Waterway, and it is really treatment based. It's a treatment retrofit for 5 acres of Pacific Avenue, installed 14 rain gardens, plus some trees and silva cells. That's the first time we've tried those in Tacoma, and we will we're hopeful that we'll get amazing big trees there. Construction cost, $2.4 million, and this is really a gateway street in Tacoma. It's a main street, our main street, if you will. And an artist was included in the design team just to add to the form, I guess, to make it pleasing and interesting. And when you get on the tour tomorrow, if you are here and want to come, you'll see channelized steel. You'll see some old recycled granite blocks that were actually extracted from city streets, put in these rain gardens, and then of course the plants. And I think there's a green flash or something that's supposed to go in, but I'm not sure if that's quite installed yet. But anyway, that's Pacific Avenue. So I just want to close kind of with the rationale for going to regional facilities to the extent that we can and where we find opportunities in Tacoma to do so. We want to target those to our most sensitive watersheds and receiving waters. The regional facilities, of course, can enjoy some economies of scale, and we intend to organize them and construct them to support development through a pay-in or an in lieu program. That's a goal. That's the ultimate, just making that clear here. And so if we are successful, which that's not only up to me, but there are regulators who will care about this, can provide developers with certainty regarding requirements, costs, timelines. So that's my comments.
My name is Art Castle. I'm Executive Vice President of the Building Industry Association of Washington. Been here almost 3 years, and prior to that, I spent 17 years as the executive of the Kitsap Home Builder Association, where I really got involved in low impact development. A couple of projects we did while I was in Kitsap through our foundation is we had a Section 319 grant to develop low impact development standards for our 4 cities and the county, and we did a several-year process where all the stakeholders, including the tribes, the jurisdictions, private sector, civil engineers, health districts, everybody else was involved in that, and we adopted and created a design manual that was adopted by all 5 jurisdictions without editing. So it was a very successful project. And along the way, one of the things we did, we had what was then the Puget Sound Action Team PI grant, and we took a $40,000 grant and did a $200,000 retrofit of the Home Builder Association office, where we excavated everything on the site except the building and retrofitted it, bringing in many of the low impact development techniques to give a showcase of these projects. One of the things that we found in Kitsap is that by having the project done the way we did, it became the tools of choice in Kitsap County. I liked when I was there calling Kitsap County the low impact development capital of Washington. It wasn't because any jurisdiction was more advanced than some of the other jurisdictions around Washington, but it was a place where all 5 jurisdictions in the development community, everybody was on board and learning how to do it, plus the acceptance in the regulatory process. So when you brought a plan in the counter, you could actually get it done. So I'm going to talk just some basic stuff here real quickly, and why I think it's exciting. It's exciting and great tools for stormwater mitigation. Stormwater mitigation, you'll probably all recognize, I know from the business side, is the single largest mitigation on any development project. It's most costly. But it has some good things on it too, and I'll talk about this. Our science, this is some bioretention. The red area shows some of the effectiveness of the pollutant removal. You've seen some other speakers talk about that previously. This is a European university who did some mitigation on dissolved metals, on pervious concrete, pervious with the aggregate base, and as you can see, by the time the water gets back into the soil, it's back to background levels. Very effective at treating that. Also, it has bioretention also reduces water temperature, so if you have the natural seep back into a wetland or stream, you're actually now having both the seep instead of the pipe at the end of the pipe, but also the right temperature going back in for the animals and the insects and what have you in that area. And the work that WSU Stormwater Center over here in Puyallup is doing, the science that they're doing with those, you got to see the pervious pavements and the bioretention. The science that they're going to provide, Department of Ecology, will dictate the regulatory benefit that those techniques are going to provide in the future. So that's something to keep in mind and keep alert there, because it's a very important process. It's probably the best science that's being done on low impact development in the country. So why low impact development? We're essentially wanting to treat a developed environment hydrologically like the pre-development. This is the Seattle C Street project, done probably a little bit over 10 years ago, where after they did it, over 98% reduction in stormwater runoff. So why was it conceived? They're sort of new technology, not the old BMPs. It can reduce the cost of stormwater infrastructure. And one of the things I found in the development community, that when the site accepts it, when the site's appropriate, most every project you can reduce the development cost by using low impact development rather than conventional stormwater BMPs. I mentioned that it meets the new regulatory requirements, and I'll talk a mention about that. And Damon, who's coming after me, is going to talk a little bit about the NPDES requirement for jurisdictions. But it's also resource protection and can be used in urban retrofit. This shows a cost on a project done in Maryland several years ago. And I think for a residential developer, this is a very important thing. We're using conventional BMPs. This project had about $14,000 in stormwater development cost per lot. And got 74 lots. So using low impact development, they were actually able to get 81 lots at a $9,100 cost on stormwater. That's a little bit dated and back from Maryland, but the point is that most projects, especially where you can infiltrate into the soils, is that there's the potential of reducing net development cost. This is something that I think most of the engineers, when I was doing the Kitsap project, really got interested in. And this shows the ratio of a rain garden area to impervious surface. And this was some of the engineering that Curtis Hinman did when they put out the rain garden handbook. And essentially what it shows, if you've got till soil, sort of difficult soils, and you put a rain garden of 20% of the area of your impervious surface on your site, it'll handle about 95% of the rain that hits your site in a year. And if you've got good soils, you'll get at about 10%, you get essentially 100% infiltration. And it shows you how effective a rain garden can be on volume in addition to the water quality. So what is low impact development? This is what we currently do in most cases. It's the old paradigm. We collect, we concentrate and convey, and we put it in prison. And you can see the concertina around here, and that's to prevent it from escaping. Okay? What low impact development does, and this is traditional development site, the size of the arrows show the volume, tends to collect, concentrate, and convey, and then dump it into a water body. What we do here's a series of bioretention cells, and you see much less flow because the water's being dealt with, both infiltrated and treated close to where it falls. And that's sort of the thing, using a lot of small controls rather than concentrated controls. You all probably seen pictures of these, bioretention, functional landscape. Some people think that's actually pretty attractive. This is one back east where they actually terraced off a subdivision to go before it went into a wetland, so all the water is naturally treated and infiltrated. We can add it into where we've traditionally had landscaping requirements. Parking lots. This is actually one you've probably seen in Portland, where these two bioretention cells here in the center handle all the roof drain from this apartment building. Got pervious pavements of some types. This is actually one of the city of Bremerton's first installation of pervious asphalt on a city street back several years ago. Pervious concrete, amending soils, that's pretty well required everywhere now. Rainwater harvesting, and if you are able to do a water budget where you look at how the cycle during the year of when rainfall comes in, and then you do the water budget of how you're going to use it. If you can zero that out, your roof then is treated as if it's landscaping, not impervious. That's how it's mitigated. Minimum excavation foundation, where you remove the vegetation, but you leave the topsoil, which allows the topsoil, which is very effective in dealing with volume of stormwater. It's a very effective technique. Vegetated roofs, surface dispersion. There's a new technique or similar technique that Ecology's approved recently, and that's a tree credit, where you get credit for the canopy area of your trees, existing trees, or if you replant, where you you can get some of that. And what that does, to the extent you're allowed to use it, it reduces the amount of impervious surface you have to mitigate. These are a couple of things I want to cover in a couple of minutes about, and Damon's going to talk a little bit more. But all Phase 1 and Phase 2 jurisdictions in Washington, that's about 80 some jurisdictions in Western Washington, must now require low impact development where feasible. And each jurisdiction over the next period of time, generally based on their mandatory comp plan update, is going to have to integrate low impact development in all their development regulations. And then before the thing, as the implementation occurs. And so this is going to be over the next several years. And I've been encouraging our members of our local builder associations, other members of the community, get involved in that, because the people who have expertise can help guide your local governments on how they're going to implement this and make it more effective and workable in the field. But the regulatory issues and feasibility, the mandate is requiring low impact development with a hierarchy of BMPs where feasible. And unfortunately, low impact development doesn't work on every site. It can't infiltrate. Sometimes you have soil types or soil layers or infiltration. These are some of the, by BMP, but some of the things. Infiltration rate of soils, depth of water table, soil suitability, slopes, among others, are some of the feasibility criteria built into the regulatory environment. One of the things I'll say on that is that I'm a big fan of low impact development. I'm concerned that the mandating, especially on the prescriptive path, could well lead to people who don't know enough designing, or a regulator who may not be familiar enough with low impact development in the science and engineering aspects, and getting installed and having failures. And the failures being blamed on low impact development when it was the mandate, almost a blind mandate. And I have a little concern about that. But time will tell how that works, and I'll answer any of your questions later. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Damon Diessner with Brown & Caldwell, and as my Brown & Caldwell water bottle says, which I just noticed while I was sitting up here, water, it's just what we do. I didn't realize that. So I'm a strategic planner and kind of I guess you could say a policy coach to a lot of local governments throughout Western Washington. We have a lot of clients across the state, and we do a lot of work advising on NPDES permit compliance. Am I too loud?
No, I'm going to take away this.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm going to be talking about the NPDES permit, but not in great technical detail. I'm going to try to talk a little bit more, stepping back, big picture, policy kinds of issues that we need to think about. And I'm not going to talk so much about what we're doing right now, but where we're headed, and what we need to think about strategically for long-term implementation. So I'm going to be talking at a very high level, focus on just a few key issues. It's going to be coming from a local government perspective, but it's also going to be talking about and thinking about community impacts down the road, and try to identify business opportunities, potential for jobs and economic development as a result of the permit. It's a little bit different take than you sometimes get on the permit. We hear a lot about how new regulations can stifle development, but there's a lot of new stuff going on with this permit. The permit itself, you know, is pretty complex. I mean, even the name of it is complex. So I suspect that most of you know that this is a federally mandated requirement, the NPDES permit that the state puts out and gives to local governments. That's a result of the Federal Clean Water Act. These permits and all this stuff that we're finally doing was anticipated in the 70s. We're finally getting around to it. As I mentioned, the name's complex, but the permit itself's got a real big thud factor with it. The permit's 70 pages. It's got a bunch of appendices attached to it. There's a 5-volume, 1,000-page stormwater manual. There's an LID manual, a rain garden manual, an M&O manual, a land use principle guidebook, and there have just got to be a lot of job opportunities and economic development potential and all that stuff. So when we start taking a look at it, and we see that there are at least 4 main areas where we can look for that kind of opportunity. And the one is with illicit discharge detection. Another is controlling runoff and low impact development, which we've heard quite a bit about. construction of stormwater control facilities, and maintenance of those stormwater control facilities. My big caveat is, as we speak, negotiations are going on with appeals to the permit. You know, your mileage may vary, but you know, what's happened in the past with appeals is the body of the work stays pretty much the same. We change some things around the edges, we might delay some things, but in general, this stuff is coming to a neighborhood near you fairly soon. With illicit discharge detection and elimination, most local governments are doing a lot of this stuff already. I won't talk about the continue part. There will be some opportunities for private sector jobs and firms that do stormwater mapping. There's going to be opportunities for illicit discharge detection and elimination training. And there may be some opportunity for field screening, particularly with some of the other maintenance kinds of things I'll be talking with later on, where we can expect some private enterprise participation. With the illicit discharge detection and elimination, of course, we're trying to track down pollutants and remove them. There are the new flexible field screening criteria, and the local government, from a policy perspective, needs to think about what inspecting or I guess surveying 40% of their system by 2017 means. Is that 40% of your catch basins, or is it 40% of your pipes, or is it 40% of the land area that drains to, or is it 40%, and now we'll get tricky, you know, 40% of the inch diameter miles? You know, what is it? And so what you need to do as a community, as a local government, is step back for a second and think what makes sense for you, both in terms of what you can afford over time, what gets you to the basins you want to get to. There are a lot of different ways to look at it, and there is going to be some potential for some level of privatization in some of that work. Low impact development is really the linchpin of the new permit from where I'm sitting and from what I hear from our clients and what we work with our clients on. All of these elements present some kind of job opportunities or some kind of business opportunity, from the LID principles to the engineering to construction, maintenance. All of these and the new technology, all of them have some level of economic development kind of an interest. On the other hand, the LID principles are truly, I think I heard the phrase, a real paradigm shift. I mean, this is a change in philosophy. You know, what we're trying to do is let the water out of Art's jail, you know? We're talking about a prison break here, where we try to produce natural sorts of runoff. There are still some appeals issues out there, and there are some potential policy issues, but it's a whole new kind of mindset. Whereas in the good old days, we in stormwater management, and I've been doing this for over 35 years, we used to, as cities, would do our planning and our zoning and set up our comprehensive plans, and then we'd build what was there, and then stormwater managers had to figure out how the heck we were going to slow down the water and clean it up from that. That wasn't working. So what we're talking about now is a real shift where before we do any of that, before we do our planning, before we do our comp plans, before we do our zoning, we figure out what the impacts are going to be to the water resources and try to figure out how we can set up our structure around that. It's a real shift. And as a result of that, there are going to be some really interesting policy decisions for local government. Things like trading off parking standards and perceived economic development associated with big parking lots to vegetation preservation, to having skinny streets and preserving existing vegetation and minimizing impervious surface and runoff versus having roadways that are deemed safe to travel on, to be able to allow for emergency medical access, that kind of thing. There are going to be a lot of issues to deal with coming down over the next 5 years or so. So with LID implementation, it's going to affect all public projects, all your CIPs in your communities. It'll affect eventually all private projects. And there was, for a while, a sort of get out of jail free card if you were working on a project, land development project, if it was under an acre, or under, in some jurisdictions, you could get out of all these sorts of requirements. That's no longer the case. It's going to affect all development and redevelopment. It'll have significant long-term impacts over the long haul. If you think about it, over the next 5 years, as these permit requirements ramp up and we start to do LID, there's going to be some change out there. But if you look at 20 years and 50 years out, it's going to be a really big difference. I mean, back when we were doing the planning for the Endangered Species Act response and stormwater, we were looking at, historical 1 to 2% redevelopment rate a year. If we ever get back in the economic times that are kind of similar to that, 2%, 50 years out there, we've changed everything, literally. That is going to be a huge work effort down the road in order to deal with that. There's going to be a lot of construction, and there's going to need to be a lot of engineering, a lot of geotech evaluation. As Art mentioned, there are some sites where LID don't fit. And we're going to need to figure that out ahead of time. You sure as heck don't want to try to pump a lot of water in the ground at the top of a steep, unstable slope. You don't want to pour it down the coal mine. There are a lot of things that you have to figure out as you're trying to implement LID and do your drainage system design. In LID construction, we're going to be having more stormwater pollution prevention plan developed as part of the construction. We'll have to keep doing source control, conveyance, treatment, best management practices. We're going to be more careful about how we preserve vegetation and how we mark those. We're going to have pollutant controls and maintenance controls. We're going to have to maintain them. We're going to have to protect the LID systems as we build them, and we're going to inspect, and we're going to inspect, and we're going to inspect some more. And with that, we're also going to have a whole bunch of LID maintenance. All of these things, it's kind of new maintenance techniques, and it's going to involve significant increased effort. And we need to think about how we're going to do that, and where are these people going to come from who are going to do all this maintenance? Remember, we're looking out 50 years, and every property's got one of these, and every property needs to be inspected. Where are these inspectors going to come from? Who are they? Who are they going to work for? Are they going to work for private industry? Are they going to work for local government? Local governments are going to... When was the last time you heard a local government say, "We have plenty of inspectors, thank you"? That ain't the way it is. They are already maxed. This is new stuff. This is new jobs. These are new people. Long-term inspection, it's just going to be a huge, huge new work effort when we start looking out and doing some strategic planning out to the horizon. So for long-term inspection models, we can look to other industries. In the wastewater sector, we've got the fats, oils, and grease program to keep from plugging up our sewers and backing sewage into our buildings. We've got water supply, backflow prevention programs that have been in place for years. And stormwater management, a whole bunch of jurisdictions around here have been doing private drainage inspection. But there are a lot of options as we see how all of these things are done across the U.S. Is it going to be done by the public sector? Are we going to privatize some of it? Are we going to allow for self-certification where property owners go out and look at their system and say, it's good? Are we going to do combinations of these? And there are potential for a lot of privatization opportunities. And also we have to figure out how we're going to pay for this. Does this come out of stormwater rates? Do we do an inspection fee? Do we put surcharges on drainage systems and their drainage rates if they don't maintain them properly? How are we going to do all this stuff? A lot of policy decisions. For long-term inspection and all these technical people that are going to be needed, there are going to be a huge training needs, and there are going to be a lot of ways that training can be given. Eventually we're probably looking at moving toward some kind of a stormwater technician certification series. How do we do that? Is that going to be through the state's trainings, their public trainings? Is it going to be through colleges, universities, private companies? What's going to happen? I can tell you where some people are trying to get out in front of this now. Some of our colleges are taking a look at the need to come up with some, an NPDES license, for lack of a better term. The colleges are looking at a variety of approaches and for and starting at the foundation of all this stuff. I mean, planners and policy people, we're figuring it out, you know. But at the foundation, there are people out there who have to maintain, operate, construct, and manage these things in the field. And those folks are going to have to get some training. The people, you know, and then this slide, it shows as journeymen. I think a lot of our jurisdictions call them skilled workers, folks who direct the other work, plan it. They're going to need to be trained. We're going to have more technical people that need to be involved, and we're going to need to bring on a new generation of professionals, of engineers, of stormwater managers who are going to be trained and ready to go with this new reality. So, to that end, some of the colleges are getting together and trying to figure out what these training needs might be. And the first thing they're going to be doing is trying to figure out how big the need is. And they're thinking about trying to put together a web-based survey, and they would like some input from you all, people you know, people in the industry, business, and two of the main people involved here are Steve Addison with Clover Park Technical College here in Pierce County, and Kimberly Hassel with Bellevue College. There are a couple of folks, those of you who work for government, there are a couple of the folks who have been kind of rabble-rousing, if you will, to get this effort going. Kit Paulson with the City of Bellevue and Joan Lee with King County have been working on this too. So if you're at all interested or you think you have input, please contact these folks. They're looking not just for input, but they're also looking for partners, for people to help move this forward so that we can get people trained up to take these new jobs that are on the horizon in this new stormwater reality. I would be remiss if I didn't say something about LID incentives, because we hear a lot about that. What are the great things how are we going to get people to do LID? And my apologies, Ben, but I look on the EPA website, and the number one thing is rate reductions, stormwater rate reductions. You need to think about that. You know, if that's, when you're starting down that policy road, you're heading into a new era of stormwater management where there's going to be nothing but increases in needs for stormwater resources. And you're also entering into an era where everything's going to have LID on it. Do you really want to start giving LID rate breaks? I mean, the long-term consequence of that is you can end up holding an empty bag and a whole bunch of LID that you can't take care of. So you might want to think about other kinds of rate or LID incentives, density credit stuff, landscape standards, economic development grants, low interest loans, maybe some kind of a water quality rate component before you head down the stormwater rate reduction path. We heard earlier today about private sector involvement in developing new technologies. I won't say any more about that. Public sector has always been involved in that. We heard about DOT's efforts in that area. One thing I want to say about the local government role in new technology is, as you're starting to develop this stuff, if there are problems, if you see difficulties, sound the alarm. We don't need a whole bunch of people following lemmings off the cliff. If it ain't working, don't do it anymore. Okay, with that, thank you very much.
Advice we can all live by. If it ain't working, don't do it anymore. Unless it's illegal to stop doing it, then you should probably keep doing it.